Hello, this is Suzie Carr. Thank you so much for joining us today. In conjunction with the GCLS Virtual Series, I want to welcome you to the September GCLS Writing Academy After Dark virtual event. So you want to be a screenwriter. This panel is sponsored by Patricia Grayhall. So thank you so much again to Patricia Grayhall for sponsoring the panel. So let's get started. We hope that you enjoy this event. All right, so thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us. And thank you, panelists, for being here with us. We're really excited. The GCLS, all of us in the community are very excited to hear from you today. And what I want to do first is start off with some introductions so people can meet you fabulous people. So first up is Emily Gutierrez. Award-winning filmmaker Emily is a writer, director, and producer. Her first short film, Italian 101, is a light-hearted love story about two young women who fall in love in their university Italian class. After the success of Italian 101, Emily went on to make the sequel, Italian 102. Growing up, Emily never got to see someone like herself on screen. As a queer, Toronto-born Filipino filmmaker, she has a dedicated voice championing the underrepresented. Emily loves food, martial arts, and working out. She lives with her wife, son, and rescue cats in Ontario, Canada. Next, we have Jax Meyer. Jax is a non-binary lesbian sapphic romance writer who lives in Colorado with their wife and daughter. They began writing in 2018, publishing 5 books before joining the WGF Veterans Writing Project for Screenwriting in 2020. During the program, Jax wrote the feature film Linking Turns about a trans snowboarder who follows her crush into the pro snowboarding circuit, but is outed by a competitor. Since then, Jax has written a TV pilot, Wonderful, Colorado, and a short film, Grace Note, which is in post-production. Whether writing novels or scripts, Jax always includes sapphic characters and romance. Their goal is to see their work on screen and improve representation for all. And then next we have Shawna Khorasani. Shawna is an independent filmmaker who loves telling queer feel-good stories. She considers herself passionate about positive and accurate LGBTQ+ media representation and strives to deliver that in her works. Shawna graduated with 2 English literature degrees, but discovered her passion for film and storytelling in her last year of college. She adapted, wrote, produced, and directed a modern literary web series based on Edmond Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac. Excuse me, I'm tripping over my words. From there, she dedicated herself to learning everything she could about the film industry. Her award-winning lesbian rom-com Lover Girl was a major festival hit during 2020. Shawna's new romance, Short Popping the Question, premiered on streaming platforms in June 2021. Cass Taylor was going to join us today, but they had an emergency and aren't able to be here. Cass, we're so sorry that you couldn't be here with us, and we hope that everything's going well. This is our panel, and what a wonderful panel. It sounds like you all have such amazing experience, and I just want to dig into some questions and get the conversation started. How did you come to screenwriting? And I will open this up to let's start with Emily. How did you come to screenwriting, and how did you learn or continue to add to your skills and your experience with it?
Mm-hmm. So growing up, I didn't really see myself represented until I watched this TV show called One Day at a Time on Netflix about a Cuban American family, and I'm Filipino, so there's some similarities with our culture. So and I was so happy that I was able to see parts of my family in this family, but it also, I'm not Cuban American, so it's like, it was just a little taste. And that's when I really realized how much I needed it, how much I needed this representation. And I thought, like, instead of waiting for it to appear on my screen, maybe I could start making the content that I wanted to see. So then I started doing film courses and workshops, and then I made my first film.
That is awesome. Thank you, Emily, for sharing that. And how do you continue to learn to enhance that skill set?
I continue to keep doing screenwriting courses. I've done a couple, 2 or 3 already. And I also have a film mentor. So he's been in the business for like 30 years, and he helps me from like the beginning of when I'm starting to write my script all the way to the film festival circuit.
That's fantastic. Let's go to Jax. Jax, how about you? How did you come to screenwriting, and how did you learn to continue to add to your skills and experience?
Well, basically my bio said it, which is convenience. Melody, no sounds, please. Between my ADHD and my kids' ADHD, there might be some random bits. So I never thought about screenwriting. And then I just learned about this. The Writers Guild Foundation has a specific 3-year-long fellowship for veterans. And so I applied the year before I got in, and I'd never even had an idea for a movie or anything before then. And I got the idea literally just in time to even apply. I had all of like a week. It was crazy. And I didn't get in that year, which was fine. Like, it wouldn't have worked out well for my life. The following year, though, since it had been in the back of my head and I knew I wanted to do it again, and another person from my small town in Wisconsin, who's a year younger than me and also was in the military, she did it that year. And so like there were this alignment happening, right? And so I was like, okay, I'll just keep it in the back of my mind. And so when I applied this time, once again, I thought I had an idea. And in the time period between them interviewing me to decide if I was going to be able to do it, and their decision, I'd come up with the idea for Linking Turns. I had a dream, the characters came, and I was like, okay, this idea, which keeps popping up randomly, apparently is still not time. I need to write about these queer snowboarders who were just freaking adorable. And so that's where it came from. And the program is absolutely phenomenal. People who have actually gone to film school said they learned more in that year than they did going to film school. And so we worked with professional mentors, all people working in the industry. I had 4 mentors who were all working. I've connected with a few more, like truly like amazing connections. And now it's really just practicing, like, because it's this constant refinement. And there's just a lot less wiggle room in writing anything for the screen than there is in a novel. There's no time for meandering. So it's just constant practice, reading articles, taking little like webinars and stuff, and then having people just read stuff and comment and help you get your head turned back around and get back on track. Like there's no shortcut for it, I don't think, at all. So that's how I approach it.
Thank you. That was really great. So interesting to hear the answers, and it's a commitment. It's a dedication. And as writers, I think everybody can relate to that commitment and that dedication and that passion and love. So it takes a lot of all of that. Now I'd love to turn to Shawna and ask you the same question. How did you come to screenwriting, and how do you learn to continue to add to your skills and experience?
Thank you. Yeah, I love this question. And also, Jax, that was a great answer. I can't wait to find out where to watch your movie. It sounds awesome. Well, writing has sort of always been around for me pretty much my whole life. Even from when I was a little girl, I would write these little short stories about like fantasy, fairy type stuff that I was really interested in at the time. And when I was in college, my very first film project sort of came about the same way Emily was talking about, how she was seeing a lack in media and that she wanted to fill, try to provide that. And I was in this online Tumblr community of these people from all over the world who were making their own independent literary web series on YouTube. And it was like, very low budget, no budget, very independent. They were doing it all on their own. And it was, these adaptations of classics like Shakespeare plays, Jane Austen novels, those sorts of things to put on YouTube. And I thought that was really, really inspiring, especially considering a lot of them were also, female filmmakers. And I'd always been interested in film. And the project that I did was based on Cyrano de Bergerac, which was one of my favorite plays in high school. And I kept thinking, if someone makes this into a show, I would really love to write for it. And so I was like hunting around the internet, seeing if that's happening, and months go by and, I'm not hearing anything about that being made. And so one day I'm like, well, why don't I just take a stab at this? How hard can it be, right? Turns out very hard, especially when I had absolutely no film experience at all. I was studying English literature, not film. I didn't have any equipment, resources. I didn't really know anyone to help me on this. So I pretty much did everything by myself, which was a great learning experience, but I wouldn't recommend it for a first-time filmmaker. And I really, really enjoyed writing that and adapting it. So that's sort of how I got my official start in screenwriting. And that project was what made me realize I wanted to continue doing that. And so the other question, how do I continue learning? I like using a variety of resources to learn and get new tips and tricks from. I have a lot of books that I read and some, like Emily said, courses or webinars that I'll take from various organizations, or I'll just get feedback from other filmmaking friends or peers, so they can provide constructive criticism and I can use that to get better and that sort of thing. And also I just read really great scripts to learn from them as well.
Yeah, I love that one too. The fact learning from our peers is so important, really is. Now we have two great questions that came in so far, and so I'm going to field these to you. From a technical point of view, Emily, what are the major differences between screenwriting and fiction writing, in your opinion?
I don't really do fiction writing, so I don't know if I can properly say.
Okay, that's fine.
That's probably best for me.
All right, Jax, take it away.
They are completely different beasts. You do not come into thinking this would be a great movie, yes, or a great TV show. Completely agree. But you cannot come in with the same mindset as a novel. It will not work. You will lose your mind, and it will just be awful. The reason why adaptations are so difficult is because in a book, we have all the real estate we want to take as long as we are moving the story forward. It doesn't matter if it's 100 pages or 500, as long as it keeps moving at an appropriate pace, right? There is a finite amount of real estate for any kind of script. Even when it's your own web series or whatever, you still have to have that arc happening in that 10 minutes or 30 minutes. You don't have it. You have to be incredibly brutal with what you put in and what you cut. And it sucks. You cut so much cool stuff, but you have to, because otherwise the pacing is wrong and it just isn't right. And if you can't get it right in the page the first time around, it's going to be even worse than even if you're filming it yourself, you're going to be filming it and going, this isn't quite right. And so I view them as a different type of muscle, just like writing poetry or songs. They are a different genre, and you will still have some of the same things, but it's, especially for someone who likes the build, it is hard It's so hard to do a slow build when you've only got this many pages, because you have to hit this beat or no one's going to keep going with this script and it's never going to be made anyway. So it is not meant to discourage anyone. It's to realize that you need to do your work, and that's reading scripts. I don't read enough, but definitely reading scripts. Read about the craft. There are some amazing people that do stuff like on Medium, the website Medium. There's some really great guides there. There's some excellent YouTube videos and such. Plenty of free resources. Don't go paying, especially right away, for courses and stuff. Unless you've got plenty of money, go for it. That's fine. But if you're having to be careful with your money, like a lot of people are, then utilize free resources first, because there's so many. There are definitely some, and there's some excellent books. If for anyone else, for anyone who follows, who likes the Bring It On franchise and Stick It. So she actually has written 2 books that have like parts of the script, and she talks about like her writing journey and her approach to writing, which is a really straightforward one. And so if you want to get a good starting point to see how it's a little bit different, pick up those books. They're on Amazon and they're lovely and very entertaining. Mm-hmm. So
great.
Basically dedicate to one or the other at chunks of time.
Great advice. Thank you for that so much, Jax. Appreciate that. All right, we have another question that came in. How does the process of getting your film made and distributed compare with getting a novel published? I'm not sure. Shawna, do you have any experience with that? Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I definitely have experience on the getting films made part, not so much on the the novel publishing part. Maybe Jax has more to say on the novel publishing part, but in terms of getting your film made, it's really hard. It's not easy, especially if you don't have a lot of funding or resources to help you do that. My first project, I mentioned I did everything on my own, and I don't even know how much I spent on that entire project, because it was pretty much all out of pocket for me. I didn't budget for anything, which was a good learning process as well. For my next project, I learned how to figure out how much money I would need to make this, and how much to pay people and all that stuff. But after my first or second short film, I came across a lot more resources and opportunities to help get your film made, such as grants or crowdfunding websites like Seed and Spark or Kickstarter or things like that. I found those pretty helpful in terms of getting them made. So that's been my main experience in terms of that. And then I think there was something about distribution, right? So distribution I didn't really delve into until my fourth and most recent short film, Popping the Question, because before then my films had just been on YouTube. So I don't know if that really counts as distribution, but with Popping the Question, I knew I didn't want to put it through the film festival. I wanted to put it on streaming platforms right away. And so I just sort of shopped around and reached out to different platforms that I felt would be a good fit on, which was mostly either queer streaming platforms or platforms aimed at female-led films. And that seemed to work out pretty well. That's how it ended up on 3 different platforms. And it's been fun. It's been nice in terms of reach and revenue as well. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
I see a question from Jax. What platforms are yours on? Popping the Question is on Netflix, which is one of my absolute favorite LGBTQ streaming platforms and organizations. Highly recommend them. It's also on Real Women's Network and Fearless. And my other film, Lover Girl, is also on Netflix for free, as well as YouTube. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Great. Now, Emily, here's a question. When writing a screenplay or teleplay, what are some things you should consider doing to help keep it fresh and realistic?
So for me, I base all of my characters on people I know. So that helps me keep it realistic. I also have my film mentor that I mentioned who helps me try to think a little bit deeper so that these characters aren't, so one-dimensional. And it's also good to have another person help me out because sometimes you're like, this is exactly what my mom would say, but it's not, it's not interesting at all to a viewer. So it's always good to have another person kind of be like, okay, let's try to think a little bit deeper and why, how did she get to this emotion? Like, what is she really feeling and why?
Yeah, it's so important to have that person, that mentor, that sounding board, because they do let you they let you explore different parts of a character probably, and the different parts that you wouldn't see. The lens that you're looking through is probably very focused on certain things, and so they let you kind of look at it through different lenses. It's a really cool process.
Oh, and another thing is just being genuinely yourself when you're writing and not trying to write like someone else, because I will give it, I guess, a fresh perspective than what we've been seeing, or, me being queer Asian woman, you don't really have a lot of those writers. So it's from a new perspective as well.
Yeah. We have a question here, Amanda Radley. Fantastic topic and panel. She said, I'm interested to know if any of the panelists think about the mechanics of production while they are writing. For example, do they consider the cost of the locations and cast and keep to simpler locations and fewer characters, or do they ignore that and just go for it? Who wants to tackle that one?
I can go.
Okay.
That is a great question. It's sort of hard to answer because on one hand, I feel like I'll just write something first and then worry about production costs later and figure out how to deliver what I have in the writing or try to work around it. But on the other hand, when I really think about it, I feel like subconsciously, most of the time, I do try to write to keep it simple, keep it to a small cast, for example, and keep my locations simple and like not grandiose or fancy. Like I won't write something and like in front of the Eiffel Tower, for example, which I'm sure it'll be really expensive to film in front of. So yeah, that's sort of my answer. Most of the time, I usually just write first and try to keep it simple, and then I'll just worry about production costs later.
Anybody else want to take that one on too?
I'll do it.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. For Italian 101, I actually did think about production costs first because I knew I was going to fund it myself. And that's just some of the advice that I got when I first started taking film courses is like, think about what locations you have access to that you can get for free or for cheap. So my first film was set in a university and I worked at a university. So I figured that would help. And I got one location for free and one for a majorly discounted rate. And I did think about keeping the cast small. So I had 2 main actors and 1 supporting actor, and that was kind of it. So I really kept that in mind. I also kept my script short. I think it was like 7.5 pages because the longer the script, the more days you have to shoot, the more expensive it gets. So I just kept everything very small. For the script I'm writing now, I'm kind of just writing, and then later I started like to weed out what I didn't really need. So again, I can keep the cost low.
Thank you. Jax, did you want to answer that too? I saw your hand up for that one too.
Yeah. And I'll give my answer, which is certainly to an extent. For instance, for linking terms, I was researching where to have the main setting be in Canada. So I was looking at these different ski resorts, but not the ones on the coast. And as I thought, oh, this one's a nice little one, that could work. But then as I was researching one nearby, it happened to mention that they don't charge you to shoot if your crew stays at the resort. And I was like, well, that seems handy. So I changed the location just for a random bit of convenience. And then when it came to my short film for Grace Note, that actually was simply a writing prompt from my buddies. We were just throwing out random 3 things, and it turned into something. And for like just to submit to someone who was looking for short films, and they wanted something that was small, right? Because it was COVID. And so originally it just had 2 characters. And then when I decided to like that I didn't want other people like to just have it and screw it up, I just said, okay, if I'm going to be making it with someone, because I knew I didn't know enough about filming, then I can expand it a little bit. And so I added 2 more characters at the end, but still it was just 4 people. And it just was happening at like a coffee shop, like on the outside of a coffee shop. So someplace super easy, super cheap. Also kept it, pretty short. But then we grossly underestimated the amount of work involved. And so that's why it's still in post-production, because we ran out of sunlight. So there are things you can try to keep in mind, but when you're new, you're going to screw it all up anyway. So there's this other idea, though, that I've heard many times. I just don't like to follow it, is most of the time the stuff you write isn't going to be made unless it's stuff you're writing for you. But if it's something you want to sell, they're going to change like locations and stuff like that anyway. So do what you want. If you want it set somewhere, just put it there. As long as, I would say, but like with anything, the setting is a part of the story. So think about it, right? Don't just pick random places, but have it be integral to the story and go with it. Like nothing is ever made exactly from what the script was, no matter how well known the person was. So play.
So you have to be ready for change and be flexible and be open to that flexibility. Yeah, that's important. That's great. We have a question here, Emily. I loved Italian 101 and was wondering, did you both write and direct that? And how did that change the process as opposed to directing someone else's screenplay?
I did both write and direct Italian 101, but that was the first time I had written or directed anything. I had never just directed before, so at that time I couldn't compare the process. I did eventually prepare to direct something else that someone else wrote. And I guess what I like about doing both is that I have more control over, well, I write, produce, and direct, so I have control over everything and can just make all the changes that I think is necessary. Whereas if I'm directing someone else's script, I have to collaborate a little bit more with the writer and producer and try to understand understand the characters and the story. Whereas if I had already written it, I already have those answers.
Yeah, that makes sense. In this day and age, do you feel that, this is to anybody, do you feel that your work would be more successful on a Netflix and Hulu or on the big screen, and why? Who wants to, Shawna, do you want to tackle this one?
Sure. Very interesting, thought-provoking question. I love both shows and movies, and I want to make both shows and movies. And I usually lean more towards shows in particular because of the possibility of the story arc going in, whatever direction you want, and different characters who you can see them grow and develop and stuff. But personally, I feel it feels like recently big streaming platforms like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or whatever don't really have such a great track record with keeping sapphic or queer TV shows alive for more than a season or two, because you see it happening left and right, I feel. And so with shows, maybe Hulu, but I'm not sure. I think I would feel more comfortable prioritizing a movie on the big screen and hoping that would be, very successful and keeping the story contained there, if that makes any sense.
Sure does. Yes. Anybody else want to answer that one too?
It's a little hard to answer when COVID totally derailed big screens. But also I think a lot of it comes down to budget. I don't write cheap stuff. Like it as in easy to self-make, you know. I'm a snowboarding movie is going to be really dang tough to do cheap because of all the stunts. But that I think would be awesome on Hulu. There's plenty of movies that just go straight to streaming, right? Wonderful Colorado, that's doesn't have to be crazy expensive, but it's also not cheap because it'd be best filmed in Colorado. It makes sense. And so those things were just kind of like a, you know, it's also hypothetical. Like at this point, no one is seeing it. So if someone from Netflix said, hey, we're interested, I would go talk to people who have experience with Netflix and see how they are at that moment, because these are tech companies. They're not media companies. And oh, man, with all of the realignment and stuff, you end up with people who are just like tech bros running media, and they don't belong there. They don't know what they're doing. And their metrics are totally wrong. So it's a matter of whether you can trust who you're talking to and that, you know, group of people at that time. So it's like, you know, there's a lot of hypotheticals involved in that.
How do you factor in the representation of sapphic stories and individuals, as well as the visibility of the LGBTQIA+ and other marginalized communities in screenwriting in general?
So how do I factor that in? So for me, being queer and being Filipino, I try to think about my experiences and experiences of people like me who I grew up with, like my family and friends, and try to put that into my scripts. Like I'm currently working on a script for my next short film about a Filipino family. And the main character is a queer woman. So I just, again, try to put in these, inject these characters with real life people and real experiences that we have that are not often seen on screen.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So let's talk about goals, because I think people would be interested in hearing what your goals are as screenwriters. Shawna, do you care to share what your goals are?
I would love to share. I have a lot of goals in terms of screenwriting and directing, but I'll keep it to screenwriting. For now, I always have so many ideas swimming around in my head and on paper at any given time. But ultimately, one of my long-term goals is to have my feature film debut and hopefully have it be a huge festival success and possibly be picked up for distribution somewhere. I also would really like to make 2 web series and have them air online and possibly also on streaming platforms. So that would be pretty fun, I think.
Yes, sounds like it. What about you, Jax? What's your goals look like? What do they look like?
At this point, they're all just super basic of like finish the completely new rewrite of Linking Turns and finish the last version of Wonderful and have the money to finish post-production for Grace Note and then figure out what the heck I'm doing in the next section of it. Well, you know, and so it's just like, it's just all like that immediate stuff. Ultimately, my focus with it is just refining my voice and making these stories really stand out, because there's so much out trying to be made, right? And you really need to be in the top like 5% if you want someone else to make it, and that's just to get it read. Unless you're some, you know, white dude with his white dude friends and they're all just making stuff, right? But when you're not, you need to be exceptional. And so since I took a different route, I didn't come in with looking at a short film focus and stuff like you guys did, which is awesome. Like I love shorts and you know, web series and stuff like that. It's so cool. I just I knew I didn't have the bandwidth to do anything small all by myself anyway. That my goal is that I want my stuff made also at the production quality I want. And that's the sticking point, I think, because there's always indie films and you can always find random people to do stuff with you. But I want it to look as good as I want it to look. Like I want it to look like it was made by a major studio with good production quality. And that means I have to get better and better each time so that people can really see that this is, that it's worth putting that into, right? Because anything with queer characters as the main can be a little more risky. So, I think my goal is just to get better during this time when life is a little harder. And then when things can align, then I've got stuff that's truly ready to go and I can take advantage of opportunities as they come up.
That's great. How about you, Emily? What are your goals?
So my goal is to finish writing this short film that I'm working on and then shoot it next year. And again, also produce and direct it. And then I guess a longer term goal is I would love to do feature films as well.
Now, I have a question. Jax, you talked a little bit about, it sounded like team. So I'm curious, from somebody who has never been a screenwriter, who is a novelist, but I maybe one day might want to dabble in that. How do you build a team? Because it sounds like you really do need a solid team behind you. So how do you do that? I mean, do you have a company and then you hire people, or you're looking for volunteers? You're looking for things like that. How do you get that team behind you?
Network. Honestly, it's just talking to people. The producer, director that I made Grace Note with, we had just been friends on Twitter, and we didn't realize that we lived like 20 minutes away from each other, but we knew each other on Twitter. We didn't even know. And even then, like the actors for that I found because we were doing table reads as just an additional part of the screenwriting program. It wasn't a normal thing. And since I had trans characters, I wanted trans actors reading even for the table read. So I reached out to a group called Trans Can Work, which is out in LA, and they connected me. Basically, I sent information and they connected me with people who were interested in doing the table read. And one of the people who read for that, like when I was doing Grace Note, I was like, God, they'll be perfect for it. And so I reached out and I was like, okay, so like one, this is what I wrote. Do you want to do it? And then I was like, okay, I cannot figure out who to casting. I don't like casting. I feel really bad. I don't want to tell people no. And I don't know how to evaluate people well beyond just if they're clearly exceptional. And I just said, hey, do you know someone who'd be really good for your, partner in this? And they connected me to someone, and it was the best situation ever. And because of then that connection is turned into the other two people in the short film, and you just keep tapping into people that and ask, just be like, hey, I'm getting involved in maybe writing a short film. I need to talk to some people, and just ask. You might be surprised how many people are available near you, especially if you're in a city. Emily, the Toronto scene has got to blow, Denver's scene away. There's so much being filmed by big studios there too. But even Denver has its own scene. And so it's look around, see if there's a Facebook group, and just start asking people and get to know people, because those are the people that you want to work with. They're the other people that are up and coming. They're typically going to be more affordable, right? You're all trying to figure stuff out at the same time. And your peers are usually who you come up with anyway. So if you take a class, try to stay in touch with people that you click with in that class, a webinar, whatever, I'm totally going to bug Shawna and Emily because I have questions about their stuff, we have to help each other. We come up as a group and we help lift each other up. So when one person gets ahead, they keep pulling other people up. And that's how we have to do it. That's how we did it with novels. That's how self-publishing became so big. is because we all helped each other.
Good point. Yeah, really, really great point. Now, do you tend to write new material for film, or do you adapt previously written stories? Let me go to Shawna for that one.
For the most part, I like to write new original content of stuff that I want to see on screen. But obviously with my first project, I did do an adaptation. That was a really fun and interesting process in translating it into a modern, queer lens and version. I mean, I wouldn't rule out doing another adaptation at some point in the future. I just generally do original content.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Emily, here's a question that came in. If you could have a dream cast, who would you want to work with?
I've never actually thought about this. I don't know. The first name that comes to mind is Shay Mitchell from Pretty Little Liars, who's part Filipino and a fellow Canadian. So that would be cool. But I'm sure I'll think about this tonight and be like, oh, why didn't I say all of these names?
Absolutely. Dream big, dream big. What about you, Shawna? Do you have any dream cast in mind?
There are actors I would love to work with for sure. I remember just a couple of their names at the moment, but like Emily said, I'm probably gonna leave now and remember all of them later. One of them is Michelle Henley, who is a trans indie actress. She was in I think called Boy Meets Girl and a bunch of other stuff. I think she's really, really talented. And then other actors, Bex, I can't remember their name, but they were in Scream, the MTV series. And gosh, who else? I'm sure a ton of other people I can't remember right now. But yeah, just really talented queer actors mostly.
That's great. And Jax, do you have any dream cast members that you're thinking of as well?
So I really suck at knowing people's names and faces a lot of times. I think in part it's an issue about it's part of the autism and like inability to like kind of recognize faces very well sometimes. But I will say like a few that come to mind would be like Mackenzie Davis is just phenomenal and is so ridiculously good at doing anything. Like that would be an utter dream. Taylor Hickson, who's one of the leads in Motherland Fort Salem. She plays Raelle for those that are just not super up on it. And if people haven't been watching that, like it just finished, please go binge it on Hulu. Like it's phenomenal. So there's always actors that for me, it's the ones that can really like, I don't know, usually it's that they don't get super into like, they don't play a lot of pretty. Because I don't write characters that are like that being pretty is a part of their thing. Like I want them to have like a depth to it, and it's easier for me to see it when they play characters that have like a bit more depth and they're outside of the norm, things like that. And honestly, if I could put the people from Grace Note into everything I do, I 100% would. I adore them and I love working with them, and they are wicked talented. So.
Awesome. What is a table read and how do you do it? Emily, how would you describe a table read?
For my first film, what I did was I booked a room and my actors came and we literally sat around a table and they had their scripts in front of them and they all read their part while I had a friend read out the descriptions in between the dialogue. And it was really great for everybody to, practice their lines and also hear all of the actors as their characters. And for me as a writer and director, it's also good for me to hear them say it so I could adjust the script if need be, or if I could adjust things in my head as a director, like maybe I'm going to change the way that this particular scene plays out based on what I'm hearing and seeing right in front of me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you find yourself surprised sometimes when you're listening to a table read, like you're like, wow, that did not come out anything like I thought it was going to come out, that didn't sound like I wanted it to sound, or, oh, that was totally misconstrued in my brain when I was writing it as the way, instead of how it came out actually in the table read. Have you ever had that experience where you felt like that?
Just a little bit, actually. For the most part, everyone says things kind of the way that I imagine it, but I always keep an open mind because sometimes they don't. And sometimes, I'll give them a note to kind of get them on the track that I want them to go on. But I like to keep an open mind because sometimes they do things that's better than I had ever imagined. So I try to just remember the main goal and be open about how I get there.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I like that. How do you push through a writer's block if you ever experience it? Do you experience it? Anybody? Okay, I see Shawna nodding. I would love to hear how you deal with that.
Sure. Well, writer's block really sucks. Let me just say that. Sometimes how I deal with it is just playing my favorite playlists. Music really helps me get in the zone when I'm writing, and I just really enjoy listening to music in different kinds of playlists to give me different moods and feelings and emotions and stuff. So that helps sometimes, but if that doesn't help and I'm really hitting a wall and I'm just, sitting at my computer and I'm like, I literally cannot think of what to write right now, I'll just, walk away for however long I need to and then come back to it. I'll do something else. Or maybe I'll do something else and then I'll be watching like a video or a TV show episode or part of a movie, and then, that'll like jog something in my brain or give me a little bit of inspiration that I need to return to it.
Anybody else have issues with writer's block from time to time? Emily, I see you nodding. I see Jack's nodding too. So we'll start with Emily and see what your answer is.
Deadlines are helpful. So if I have a meeting with my mentor, it'll be like, okay, we're going to talk on Monday. So it's like, oh, I better have this done by Monday. So it's like the weekend. Suddenly I have some inspiration as to what to write.
That's so important to remember, is that the deadline, or even if you don't have a deadline, giving yourself a deadline, or giving yourself, setting your clock for 10 minutes and writing for 10 minutes, giving yourself that 10-minute deadline to get something done. I find that to be helpful. So yeah, that's a really good point. Jax, what about you?
So I'm kind of the opposite, in that pressure makes it worse. And typically my issues, I never struggled with it until the last 9 months or so. And there's been a whole lot of things happening in my family and health-wise and everything else that's made it just really difficult. And I think for me, usually what helps the most is I need to brainstorm with someone. They just need to be there to listen. They don't even have to actually give me any ideas at all. But that's when the most effective thing, no matter what I'm writing, it's to talk to someone and be like, I don't know why this isn't working, or, whatever. Just in bouncing ideas off, it usually gets things going. However, it has been much tougher this year. And so what started to help this now was finally starting into Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way morning pages. I noticed when I was doing them consistently, writing flowed better. Overall creativity was better. When life kicked my butt more because the school year started and things like that, and I hadn't been doing it, I noticed it got so much harder again. And I would work 2 hours to try to tweak a paragraph, which is such a waste of time when you don't have time. So I'm going back to my morning pages now. And so I strongly recommend that to people. Even if you don't struggle with writer's block and haven't yet, it just opens up creativity a lot. And so those are my 2 recommendations. Check out Julia Cameron's morning pages. You can literally Google it. You don't even have to really read the book, and brainstorm with someone, just bounce ideas.
Love it. Yes. How do you build your characters? Do you, how do you do that? Do you brainstorm? Do you base it on somebody that I think that Emily mentioned that she sometimes does that. Yeah, who wants to tackle this one? All right, Jax, you're up.
I mean, I can add a couple just less traditional things in that I have enough ideas that I don't ever go searching for them. So I would say about half the time, especially with screenwriting, it will come to me in a dream. And then it's up to me afterwards to start to discover who they are. When I first dreamed about Faith and Ripley, I thought the story was about Ripley. Ripley was just there, like so present in this dream. And Faith was this total mystery. And it took me a few days to figure out it's because Faith is trans. And as soon as that happened, and I shifted the perspective and knew that the main story was about Faith, then it started to come together. Granted, there are now like 6 different versions of this story, but usually that's what happens is the characters will arrive in my brain in some way, and then it's up to me to understand them. And I think in screenwriting, it pushes you more to really explore like what is the biggest story you can get from them, and where's the like deepest truth that you can reach with them. And that's just, brainstorming and writing and rewriting and having people say that doesn't quite work. And then you get sad, and it's a whole process. It's just really messy, but in the end, absolutely worth it. So.
Yeah, that is such a cool process, the creative process, and how I get what you mean about them coming to you in your dreams, and then you just experiment with them. And it's such a fun process. Now, we do see somebody recommended books or courses on screenwriting. I know, Jax, you're typing an answer, but does anybody want to verbally talk about any recommended books or courses that you would take on screenwriting? Yes, Shawna.
You have to go with Save the Cats. There are multiple versions for different kinds of writing, but Save the Cat for screenwriting. I have Save the Cat writes for TV. They are so helpful and useful, and pretty much lay it all out and show you how to do it like step by step. So I really recommend Save the Cat.
Save the Cat. Oh, interesting. Anybody else have any recommendations?
Sorry, real quick, just FYI, Save the Cat is controversial. It's still a great starting point for people, but just be prepared like that's not your end point, or you will just scream noob everywhere.
Okay. All right. So one more question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Let's see. What are you better at? Dialogue or description? Emily, let's turn it over to you for that. What do you think you're better at?
I'm not sure, but I think it's description. Just because, I don't know, maybe I feel a little bit more relaxed when I write description, because when you write dialogue, that's what people hear. And then I just get a little bit nervous. I'm like, is this a good line? But description, I can just, take it easy.
That's great. What about you, Shawna?
Definitely dialogue. I feel that it comes more naturally to me more often than description does, because I really like, I feel like I have a way with words and like using different words to describe a specific thing that I would want a character to say, for example, or how to phrase something differently rather than like a standard, like, I don't know, like a common line of dialogue, like, how are you? Or, just phrasing it differently. So I really enjoy dialogue.
That's great. And Jax, are you better at dialogue or description?
Oh, I'm 100% dialogue focused everywhere. It's just, that's always it. For me, it's the banter, and that's how I learn the characters too. And so I'm constantly struggling with how much description is too much description, and there are no rules. And that's the most challenging part of screenwriting still for me. I'm constantly just like, I don't know, what's too much, what's too little. And then I just send it to my friends and say, fix it. It's
interesting. Yes. Do you find that you have conversations with your characters out loud sometimes, like you're cooking dinner and and you're having this dialogue that you're hearing the dialogue in your head? Jax is shaking her head. No. Anybody? Shawna, do you have dialogues with your characters?
I feel like that's a common thing that happens to a lot of writers. It hasn't really happened to me yet, but I'm sure it will at some point.
Emily, do you talk to your characters? Or do your characters talk to you?
Yes, my wife likes to make fun of me because sometimes I am like kind of moving my lips quietly as I'm having or as I'm seeing characters maybe talk to each other or me.
I love it. That's great. Well, this has been such a really great session. We're pretty much at the top of the hour. We had some really great questions from the audience. So thank you so much, audience, for participating and asking those great questions and getting this conversation rolling. You've really helped to enlighten all of us. So we appreciate you being part of this, all three of you. It just was a wonderful conversation. I learned a bunch and it makes me excited. I want to go learn more about this. So thank you for inspiring me and for everybody else. So thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate it. The GCLS is very grateful for your support and we look forward to seeing you at our next virtual session. Take care and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Suzie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And yes, Jax, definitely check out Lesflix and everyone else check out.
Exactly.
Lesflix.
Everyone needs to go to Lesflix now and check out their stuff because
Check it.
They're literally like the next, like the new lesbian Netflix. They have so much and they're adding stuff constantly.
Awesome. Thank you so
awesome.
much. That's great.
Thanks,
Everyone go check it out right now.
Yes.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.